I'm in pursuit of the best cup of drip coffee, and in my quest, I may have found this to be the best. This is the Clever Dripper, and so far, after everything I've tried, it makes a really good cup of coffee. At first glance, it looks like a pour over, but it has one significant difference. There's a valve on the bottom. The water is released when the Clever Dripper is rested on the lip of a cup or a mug. The water soaks the grounds for as long as you like. I found that from first pour to when I release the water, I like a 3.5 minute steep time. I prefer the coffee the Clever Dripper makes over a standard pour over. I want to see if there's a scientific reason for this. I recently released a video where I reviewed some great SCA approved machines, and even though I'm really happy using my favorite machine, the Breville, I'm still quite happy with the Clever Dripper, but it does have its challenges. I'm going to make 3 identical cups of coffee using a standard pour over, the Breville, and the Clever Dripper. I want to see if all 3 of these methods extract the same amount of total dissolved solids. I'm using the same amounts of acidity or lighter roast, the same grind size, and the same water to coffee ratio of 150 milliliters of water to 8.5 grams of coffee. There are a lot of schools of thought about what affects a cup of coffee. Agitation is one variable. The kettle spout is an important element when making pour-over coffee. See, if air is mixed with the water, the stream will be less uniform and the grounds will be stirred with more force, and supposedly this makes a harsher cup of coffee. Water temperature does affect coffee brewing, not so much the recommended range from 195 to 205 Fahrenheit, more so above or below the recommended temperatures. The steep time also affects the flavor of the coffee. I have found that lighter roasts do better with a longer steep time. Will the Breville machine make a better or equal cup of coffee to the Clever Dripper if I simulate the Clever Dripper brewing process on the Breville? And you can do this with any coffee brewer you have as long as there is a release valve on the bottom of the brew basket. Just don't put the carafe under the brew basket until blooming is done. The water stays with the grounds until the valve is depressed, just like when using the Clever Dripper. Now, the one drawback is that you cannot add more than 450 milliliters of water to the brew basket because it will overflow. All right, now that these are brewed and steep, let's give them a try. Clever Dripper, pour over, Breville. Believe it or not, I like the Breville better than the Clever Dripper when I allow it to behave as a Clever Dripper. The Clever Dripper is a touch smoother than the Breville, but the Breville almost has stronger, the flavors are coming through a little bit more. It's really close. I mean, very hard to tell. I'm preferring the Breville actually a little bit more than the Clever Dripper, but let me compare these two now and see. Boy, these are everything here is really close, as it should be. I mean, we really didn't modify much, but the Clever Dripper just has an edge over the pour over, and it's much easier to make because you don't have to sit there and babysit the water as you pour it over the ground. Yeah, the Clever Dripper makes a much smoother cup, but we're gonna check the total dissolved solids in a minute. For me, the more complex and delicious cup is the Breville out of all 3. So when you're making a regular batch of coffee in a Breville, you just put the canister underneath it. Clearly, we're not doing that. We're letting it bloom while the water is inside of the brew basket, letting it steep in there, and then we're putting the carafe under the brew basket so that the water gets released, and it really makes an exceptional cup of coffee. Just a brief overview when you're measuring total dissolved solids. First, you have to use distilled water to give it a basis. So you actually set it to 0 with distilled water, which is what I have here. And you have to do that quite often. So that's what I was doing. The 3 values that we got, the Clever Dripper got a 0.94, the pour over got a 0.78, and the Breville got a 1.07. So what does that mean? It means that there was more ground coffee dissolved in the Breville than there was in the Clever Dripper and the pour over. The pour over was only 0.78. The flavors were really comparable, but maybe I like it more because the Breville dissolved more solids into the hot water. The Clever Dripper was a close second, but it was also very, very close in dissolved solids. It was 0.94, 1.07. And this was the least, 0.78. Maybe that's why it was my least favorite. I don't know, but all other specs were the same. This is how much coffee I like to drink in the morning. 20 US fluid ounces or 591.471 milliliters. And I need just that. 1 gram of water is equal to 1 milliliter of water. You cannot add more than 450 milliliters or 450 grams of water to the Clever Dripper. It's not going to fit. And that amount is not enough for me. So here is how I tackle that problem. Heat up your kettle to 205 degrees Fahrenheit or 96 degrees Celsius. Wet your coffee filter inside the Clever Dripper and drain out any excess water. Place the Clever Dripper on the scale and zero out the scale. Weigh out 66 grams of coffee, zero out your scale again. Start your timer. Slowly pour the hot water onto the grounds evenly until the scale reads 400 grams or 400 milliliters. Place the lid that comes with the Clever Dripper onto the Clever Dripper. When the timer reads 2.5 minutes, place your mug onto the scale and the Clever Dripper on top of the mug. Zero out the scale for a third time and add 150 grams or 150 milliliters of water to the Clever Dripper. Replace the lid and wait a minute or so until all the coffee has drained into the mug. As I mentioned in my SCA Certified Brewer review video, and a link to that will be made at the end of this video, the Breville does come with 2 brew baskets. In an intensive study in partnership with USC Davis, Breville felt that a flat brew basket makes a better batch of coffee when brewing more than 8 cups or 1,200 milliliters. The question is, how will the coffee taste if I simulate the Clever Dripper using the Breville with the flat bottom basket instead of the cone? By doing so, I can make a full 20 ounces of coffee with the Breville as if I'm using the Clever Dripper. So that was a mistake that I'm really glad just happened. This release valve over here, I guess, is automated. When you set this Breville to bloom, it will hold the water inside of the ground basket or the brew basket, and it allows it to steep for however much time you set. Mine was set to 1 minute. What I didn't realize is that this was automated. I thought that the bottom of this is what turned it on. When I didn't have this in there, this popped up automatically after my bloom feature was over. If you have this here, it's going to release coffee into the thermal carafe. If you take this out, it'll do its proper bloom, but then ultimately it says, hey, I need a carafe underneath here. Whether you want to put one or not, I'm releasing the coffee out of my brew basket. So this automatically popped up. So if you want to simulate the Clever Dripper, your best bet is to use the brew basket without the thermal carafe and then put the thermal carafe underneath when the bloom cycle is just about over. I want to see what this tastes like because I use the flat bottom brew basket instead of the cone. I want to see because it supposedly doesn't make as good of a cup of coffee. Yeah, it really doesn't. It kind of makes it flat. Yeah, it's definitely not as good. And I've tested this before. I just thought I'd never actually made this behave like a Clever Dripper. So the ideal way to do it is to just use the cone-shaped basket, put however much coffee you want in your mug, in my case 20 ounces, wait for the bloom cycle to come to an end before you put the thermal carafe in, and it truly makes the best cup of coffee out of all 3. By hitting like and subscribe, it really helps me to make more of these future videos for free because popularity is what drives these videos. Thank you for doing that for me. Click on one of these videos for more great content. Cheers.